I have recently, as many of you know, I think I've recently met with the FBI concerning the election issue mentioned in the Mueller report, which was, I guess, come out a couple weeks ago. And this is for the 2016 election. Two Florida counties experienced intrusion into the supervisor of election networks. There was no manipulation or anything, but there was voter data that was able to be gathered. Now, that voter data, I think, was public anyways. Nevertheless, those were intrusions. It did not affect any voting or anything like that. So when the FBI will talk about election infrastructure, they include anything that could be in the supervisor of elections. This was something, where they had a spear phishing. Someone clicked on it, so someone was able to get access to things, but nothing that affected the vote count. I was pleased to hear from both the FBI and DHS during that meeting that Florida is one of the most engaged states in the country on election security in their judgment. We've deployed more Albert sensors to protect election infrastructure than any other state. So we're trying to figure out what the state knew at the time. There was apparently, the FBI said that there was members of there were state agents on a task force who had access to some of this information. Obviously, the previous administration and the head of FDLE did not have that information. So we're trying to figure out, what was the breakdown? Was it that FBI didn't want to share, or was it just simply that the information didn't get reported up? So we hopefully will be able to run that aground very soon. But the Secretary of State's office has really been forward-leaning on this. They're doing training, they're identifying any type of threats, but the cyber threats go way beyond just elections offices. I mean, really agencies, private sector. This stuff is very, very significant in terms of what it could affect far beyond just this. But that's the issue. So there was no manipulation. It didn't have any effect, but there were two counties, and I'm not allowed to name the counties. I signed a disclosure agreement. I would be willing to name it for you guys, but they asked me to do that, so I'm going to respect their wishes. So, and with that, and then finally, I just want to thank the president. He had committed to me several months ago that he would commit $200 million for our Everglades projects. We obviously had a watershed year for funding for water resources in Everglades here at the state level. We're putting our money where our mouth is. We're not expecting the federal government to do everything for us, but it would be nice if they would step up to the plate. There was some concern by some that maybe they wouldn't do that, but the president told me he would, and yesterday with his tweet, the $200 million is exactly what we asked for, and really, really represents, I think, an important milestone. So I'm really, really happy with what the president has done to come through for that, and to come through with the hurricane relief. I got the 45 days early on for 100% reimbursement, which is important, but this debris is taking much longer than 45 days. And so him to do the 90-10 reimbursement, that's going to be a huge relief to a lot of these small communities and rural communities in Northwest Florida. So I feel I'm happy that that was done. Obviously, the president called for the passing of the supplemental. I'd like to see that too, but Congress is what it is, so hopefully they'll be able to do the right thing very shortly. With that,
Governor, have the counties been notified, and what actions have they taken?
So the two counties at issue here, the FBI was working with them in 2016 and to identify and to take whatever actions happened. So they just asked me not to name the two counties for whatever reason, so I'm respecting that. But this was something that the counties knew about prior to the 2016 election.
Can you tell us, Governor, a little bit more about when and where you met with FBI and DHS and who was there and so forth?
Yeah, so we met in Tallahassee. I think it was at the FBI office. We had folks from Washington that came down from the FBI and from DHS, and then some of the local folks from both agencies here in Florida. Then we had FDLE, we had myself, we had my Chief of Staff, Shane Strum, and we had our Secretary of State, Laurel Lee. So, we appreciate getting that. And look, I was frustrated that when the Mueller report came out, the FBI wouldn't tell me, our office inquired, their position is this was something that was known at the time. Now, I don't know whether I wasn't governor then, but I think it's important that if there is a threat that we at the state level know, so that Secretary of State can work with the supervisors to be able to deploy whatever measures are necessary.
And in your judgment, sir, after this meeting, what's the Fed's rationale for having this non-disclosure agreement?
You'd have to ask them, but I would imagine, so you have, anyone who's been in government and these things understand, you have core information that really is classified, very sensitive. And then what happens is you kind of get beyond that, where anything can be viewed. Well, if they know this, they may be able to figure that out. So I think they think that if we name the counties, then that may reveal information to the perpetrators that we know kind of what they did. But you'd have to ask them. So I think it should be named because, in one of the Mueller indictments for these Russian folks, this is one of the things that's mentioned in the indictment. Now, they didn't say Florida, but they did say they supported this. They were referring to this incident. If you were to try to prove that in court, you would have to name it. You can't convict someone, say you hacked something. We can't tell you what you hacked, but you hacked. So if they ever brought that case to trial, they would have to do it. Now, I think they don't anticipate that case ever coming to trial because these are in absentia companies and individuals. But they would have to name them if they actually wanted a conviction.
Can I clarify something?
Yep.
Make sure I understand. So again, you're kind of verifying what Senator Rubio said, that this was access to the voter registration database. And it has nothing to do with the tallying of votes, obviously. But the question was there any evidence that they tried to tamper with the voter rolls?
No. So there was no manipulation.
Okay, so when you say that, that means like they didn't try to change names?
Right, exactly.
Or anything like that? Okay.
That's right, yep.
Have you spoken with Senator Scott on this, and from your conversation with the FBI, did you get any understanding the depth of knowledge the Scott administration had of this?
Well, as I have not spoken to Senator Scott, but as I said, the FBI, I think we were frustrated by saying, hey, this shows up in the Mueller report. No one ever said anything to me. Now, granted, I took office in 2019. This happened in 2016. So I get why the FBI wouldn't necessarily rush to tell me something that happened several years ago. But it was a position of people who were in the agencies at the time and are still serving that the FBI did not brief them on this and that this was not something that they knew was going on. The FBI's position is that there were members on the FBI task force who had access to some of the information. So we just want to figure out what the deal is, and we'll respond. However, if the FBI is going to say, there's just some things we're not going to share because we feel like that would not be good with our mission. Okay, as long as we know that, then we can do it. But I think in this instance, certainly being able to have the state authorities read in, because we can offer support to these counties. Some of these counties, they don't necessarily have all the resources to mount some of this stuff, and we may have some expertise up here because we're looking at the whole state and all 67 counties.
Does this have any questions about the vendor that was the door that opened for the hackers?
So I'm not sure what I can say, but I guess I can say that the reason why those counties got affected was not necessarily the counties, but it was because of a private vendor they were using.
Did the FBI give any indication of how likely that Florida, any part of Florida's infrastructure would be targeted again in 2020 and whether or not they would be able to actually change votes and totals and so forth?
So obviously for me, my main concern is that people go in, they vote, the vote gets counted, and we have a fair result. And so if you look at what they access, that would not have been able to do that. And there's enough redundancy built in that even if somehow went on a website and changed something, that is not going to be sufficient. And so I would say that the briefing did not think that was something that was ever in jeopardy based on this incident. DHS has said we've taken good action, and I've just instructed Secretary of State, look, make sure that we obviously want to protect against any intrusion, but if something happens like that there's not a way to then get into the core, what I would consider core election infrastructure, which is like you show up, you get a ballot, you vote, and then that's tallied.
Do we know what level were the state employees? Were they state employees? Were they local? Were members of this task force?
Can you repeat that?
You mentioned the members, state or local officials were members of our task force.
I think it was FDLE members. I'm not sure that they were local. There might have been, but I don't think that they said that. So I think it was Florida Department of Law Enforcement.
What level?
I don't, but we're going to figure out kind of what the deal is. And, here, and part of it too is like, you may have had an intrusion then. At the time, it probably didn't seem like a big deal. I mean, there wasn't even, the whole Russia stuff didn't even start when this had happened, really. So, so there may have been some indication, but they may not have viewed it as a significant, maybe in hindsight it's viewed as more, I don't know. I mean, we're going to try to figure out kind of what the state, was given access to, what we knew, and if there were things that we should have known, obviously, we're going to appeal to the federal government to say, look, this is a team effort. I mean, we have, an interest in making sure that this stuff's done good, and other stuff. I mean, we talk a lot about the Russia stuff because it's at the political football in Washington. When I was in the Congress, China hacked about 10 million personnel files from the Office of Personnel Management, which had the SF-86 security clearance forms. That's very sensitive information about millions and millions of Americans. Probably one of the biggest intrusions ever. Now, it didn't get a lot of news coverage, maybe a day or two, because it didn't really fit a political narrative. But the fact of the matter is that was a serious cyber intrusion that potentially could have a lot of effects going forward. So this is an issue that really is much broader than just one supervisor of elections.
Are you confident the door's been closed for the 2020 election, or is there still at risk?
I think that the agencies were very laudatory about Florida's efforts as really being ahead of the curve. We want to continue to do that. But I think the threats evolve, and so I don't want to ever say, hey, there's no more threats. I mean, because, it's just something that you always got to be vigilant about.
Just to clarify, both these two breaches have been tied back to Russia?
I think I can say that, yes, basically affiliated folks.
Any response, any idea about what happened with that vendor? I know it's the vendor I'm thinking of. They do work with a number of counties, and obviously they were the common denominator in terms of this breach.
So I think that there may have been, something may have happened yet. I mean, I didn't really have information given to me about that. This was a spear phishing type attack, but it was described to me as relatively sophisticated as those things go. Of course, you usually train the employees, hey, if you just get an email, don't click on the link because it's potentially hazardous. We used to have to go through that training all the time. So hopefully, we'll be able to train folks up. But I was told that it was not out of the realm of a possibility that a reasonable person could think this was legit. I mean, it wasn't like, Nigerian gold, here's all this, we're going to give you $1 million from Nigeria, those types of things. That's not what this was.
We'll take one more question, guys. One more.
Are you aware of the fact that the Department of State, your Department of State, asked for additional money for cybersecurity training and resources in this last budget cycle, and I'm not sure they got it?
Well, look, we've done a lot, as I mentioned. We're leading the nation in some of the things that we're doing. So I think we're going to be able, to get the job done. And if we're not, as we get into the fall and winter, then we'll obviously be able to seek additional help at that time. But my sense is that we've got, we have the ability to do this. But the information flow is important. If there's things that we have to address, we just need to know that we have to address them. And if we know we have to address them, then it makes it a lot easier. So thank you guys, appreciate it.